If you're a live streamer or if you make videos, you might have found that it can be a challenge to make your content look awesome. So I'm gonna share with you 5 core essentials to making your live streams and your video content look a lot better. Starting right now with turning off your overhead lights and using controlled lighting. When you do this, it removes harsh shadows. It ensures your light color is correct because there's different types of light color and different quality of light. And it also ensures that your light is not too bright or too dim. Another reason controlled lighting can make a really big difference is it can soften the shadows that are on your face and even in the room. So for example, if you don't have any diffusion on a light source, what's going to happen is all the shadows are going to be really harsh. But if you have a lot of diffusion on the light, then what's going to happen is it's going to create more gradients in the shadows, which means that things aren't going to stand out as much. So if you have creases on your face, for example, or if you have wrinkles of some kind, then in that particular case, it'll even soften those, which will help with your appearance as well as making the whole setup look more flattering. And if we're honest, that's probably what we're all going for anyway, right? As part of the controlled lighting, it's helpful unless you're changing the color for a stylistic effect to make sure that you are using the same color of light in all of the bulbs that are hitting you. Now, another thing that can make a really big difference when it comes to your lighting is making sure that you are adjusting your white balance within the device that you are recording or live streaming on. If you're buying bulbs for your controlled lighting setup because let's say you're using lamps around your house, then in that particular case, you want to make sure that you are getting a light with the color between 5500 Kelvin and 6500 Kelvin. That is daylight color, and that will help make your skin look more accurate and more flattering. Next, you want to make sure that you adjust everything manually. It doesn't matter if you're using a high quality DSLR camera, it doesn't matter if you're using a dedicated video camera or even a webcam. If there are differences in light color or if there's differences in anything that's happening in the room, it can cause everything to change within the camera itself, and it can end up knocking off what your image looks like. Which brings me to the next topic, adjusting everything manually. For the sake of speed and not having to mess with things too much, it's common for people to just run everything that they're doing on automatic, but the downside of that is it can cause inconsistencies in your footage, and it can also cause inconsistencies just from clip to clip or from the time that you start your stream to the time that you finish your stream, which can then make everything look weird if you're cutting out different clips for repurposing and stuff like that. So because of that, make sure that you manually adjust your exposure, make sure that you manually adjust your white balance on your camera, like I mentioned a minute ago. Pretty much everything, even focus, as long as you're not making the type of content where you might hold something up to the camera that the camera's gonna need to focus on. But if you are in that situation where you are holding things up to the camera and you need that dynamic focus, then in that particular case, then leave the autofocus on, but dial in everything else manually. And it doesn't matter if you're using a DSLR camera, doesn't matter if you're using a dedicated video camera or even a webcam or your phone, the white balance needs to be dialed in manually in order for you to be able to control what the scene actually looks like. And not just the white balance, like everything needs to be dialed in. And then once you get it all locked in, then what's going to happen is you're gonna have extreme consistency through everything that you're creating. The next tip is to make sure that you are being intentional with the colors and with the scene that you are setting up for your videos or your live stream. Your use of color when it comes to creating content of any kind can make a huge difference in what your content looks like. Even when you use the same exact lighting setup, but you change the colors, it will make a big difference on what everything looks and feels like when people are interacting with your content. Another thing you want to make sure you're thinking about once you get everything set up and looking great in terms of the lighting that's on you and your camera adjustments is when it comes to the background, it can be really helpful to add some type of lighting in your background as well if you don't have natural light or something like that coming into that background area. For this, you can use any type of light that you would project onto the background, or you can use what's called a practical light. That can be just a lamp that you have sitting around the house, or maybe a lamp that you already have sitting in the background, but instead of leaving it off, when you turn it on, it creates a sense of depth between the camera, you, and what it is that's happening in the background. But you want to make sure that it's far enough back that it creates that sense of depth. There's another video here on the Streamyard channel that goes on a deep dive into lighting and to making yourself look really good when it comes to lighting. I'll put a link to that at the top of the screen and down in the video description. Another thing that will make a really big difference for you is make sure that when you are setting up your scene, that you have yourself framed properly, that you're taking up enough of the frame, because a lot of content creators that don't know the concepts of filmmaking and photography and videography, what they'll do is they will put themselves really low in the frame or off to one side where it's too much to one side where it's not comfortable, or they'll they'll just offset themselves in the center or something like that, and it makes for a really awkward viewing experience for the viewers that are interacting with that content. For example, there's a concept called the rule of thirds, where you are dividing the screen into 9 equal parts, and then you're positioning yourself intentionally into certain places on the screen. Another part of that is also making sure that you have enough head space, or the space between the top of your head and the top of the frame, but not too much that it looks awkward. That part specifically can require a little bit of experimentation, so make sure that you spend the time to do that, because it can also make a really big difference on what your content feels like when somebody's interacting with it. The next tip is to make sure that you're using a camera and or a lens that will also make you look flattering. Webcams are typically fine for this because they're made out of the box to be something that people can use, but some webcams do have ultra wide settings and things like that, and if you use those settings, it can cause your facial features to distort a little bit, and when you put your arms close to the camera, it ends up making your arms look really long and all kinds of little details like that. So just make sure that the lens that you're using on your camera or the settings for your webcam or phone are settings that also make you look flattering. And when it comes to this idea, the only real downside of webcams is they typically will come with stylistic limitations. So if you have a very specific look that you're going for, in that case, you might need to upgrade, which is where you have to be extra careful when it comes to the lens that you choose to get on your camera. For example, the lens that's on the camera that I'm using to record this video right now, this is a 35mm lens, and you can see that it just makes me look more natural. Whereas when I use my 16mm lens, it can distort some of my features, and if I get a little bit close to the camera, it can also make my arms or my hands look really big or long. But the advantage of a wide angle lens is it can make you look thinner, and it can also help make the space that you're in look bigger as well. So if you are shooting in like a tight space, or you're live streaming in like a tighter place, then in that particular case, using a wide angle lens will help make it all a little bit more comfortable because it'll appear bigger to the viewer. And when it comes to setting up your entire scene, there's a lot of real detail that you can get into when it comes to how viewers are going to perceive your content. So because of that, we have an entire video that I put together here on the Streamyard channel. It's pretty long, but it's worth the watch. And I really recommend that if you are setting up your scene, that you click into this right now and you go check that out as well, because it's going to help you learn a ton about setting up your scene and getting everything looking right. We talk a little bit more about color and things like that in there as well. So make sure that you click into that now, and I'll see you over in the next video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you there.